Hey, welcome to Multi-Virtual 2020's Right Track. I'm Vanessa Junta, the director of the Right Track, and this panel is Writing People Not Like You. When we write outside our own experience, we have extra responsibility for getting it right, for doing it well. This panel will discuss ways of bringing authenticity to your diverse characters in a way that is positive, respectful, and understanding of the things that make us different and the things that make us similar. If you're watching this as part of the convention weekend live stream, please come over to the Discord and join us in the Right Track for a watch party with some of the panelists. We can all watch it together. It'll be great. Instructions on how to get into our Discord can be found at multiversecon.org/discord. Also, every year we choose a charity to donate to. This year, we're giving to the Equal Justice Initiative. You can help by donating at our Ko-Fi site, that is ko-fi.com/multiversecon. All donations minus fees will go to support the Equal Justice Initiative, and you can learn more about them at eji.org. Now, don't forget, for more about our panelists, please check the links below for videos from them. And additionally, you can go on to multiversecon.org and you can find links for all of our guests. So now I'm going to pass this on to our moderator for this panel, Lee Martindale.
Hello, and welcome to Writing People You Don't Know. This panel is about writing characters that are different from you and making them believable. With me on this panel are three, well, there hopefully will be four, writers who bring a wealth of information to the topic. Let's begin by finding out who they are. DL.
Hi there, I'm Dahlia Wainright. I'm the author of the Hollow Sun series, which has folklore from all over the world. It also has a lot of very diverse characters, especially a lot of LGBT representation because I myself am queer, and that's very important to me, and representation in general is very important to me.
Katie.
Hey, my name is Katie Edwards. I have created an urban fantasy series called the Tarot Sequence that reimagines the modern world with Atlantis in it, and it heavily features lesbian, gay, plus identities with a growing and heavy emphasis on the plus, especially.
Lex.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Christian. I hope everybody can hear me. Excellent. And I am a writer of paranormal and contemporary romance. My latest series is the Crawford's Landing series, and it's about a small town. The series of books are about people in a small town, and it's a small town in the South, and so there's all kinds of different people there. And part of the reason that I wanted to do that was to show that small towns have very diverse cultures in them, and are also, people also tend to think of small towns in the South as being, you know, very white, very conservative, but they're not. So there's a lot of different characters in the town. You know, we have a lot of people of color, we have a lot of people of diverse gender and diverse sexualities that will feature in the books.
Very good. I have been writing short stories now for 25 years. I've edited 2 anthologies. The first was Such a Pretty Face, the theme of which was heroes and heroines who are people of size, fat folk. I knew a little something about that. My second anthology was called The Ladies of Trade Town. It was about sex workers. However, I told them keep it PG. But we had a lot of diversity in both anthologies. I encouraged it, and the writers met the challenge. Let's begin by finding out. Okay, we all know that every writer writes people that are not like themselves. I write men, and well, I'm not. So everybody writes people who are not like them. Not everybody does it well. When you start out with a character in mind, how do you go about making sure that you get it right? Who wants to? Let's start with Alex.
Well, I always tend to, I mean, I write characters that are not like myself, but I like to think that I have lots of different friends that are very different. And I make it a point to have a lot of different people in my friends group. And so I feel like if you know people who are other than yourself, then it becomes easier to make your characters more authentic that way. We actually talk about this a lot in the romance community because I don't want to say that we have a lot of people in the romance community who live in bubbles, but we kind of do. You know, a lot of women who are white, cisgender, in a particular socioeconomic class, and they never kind of break out of that. And so when they get ready to say, when everybody says, oh, well, you need to have more diversity in your fiction, then they really don't know how to do that because they don't really know anybody that's not like them. So I think it's important to step outside of your comfort zone and make it a point to meet people who are not necessarily like you, before you start trying to write a person that is not like you. And then ask questions. You know, I've asked a million dumb questions of people who are not like me, and I hope that they haven't been offended. But it's just because I want to make sure that that experience is authentic.
Katie?
You know, I think my entry point into this, it turned out to be completely different from how I would have expected. I thought I was Mr. Diversity because I'm writing this urban fantasy series with a lot of it focusing from the gay experience. It's not a gay novel. It's an urban fantasy that just happens to feature a lot of people who just happen to be gay. But while I thought I was Mr. Championing diversity for doing that, at the end, I really engaged with a lot of readers, and they were very honest with me. I love the story, but the white gay male experience does not show the entire spectrum of the gay community, of the gay lesbian plus community. And they got involved with what I was doing because they liked it enough to give me a chance to see if I could expand beyond my comfort zone. And because of that, my writings become much more of a shared experience. I mean, my readers interact with me all the time. They give me recommendations for world building, and they give me input on, in my third novel, I'm featuring, there's a sort of a third tier character who is really important to a certain aspect of the novel, and she gets around in a powered wheelchair. And I have, for instance, a reader who is in a wheelchair, and they're giving me advice on where do you store things in the wheelchair? Like, how is it built for functionality? And it's been just the most creative and amazing journey because of that dialogue I'm having before I even write a scene, and sort of the authenticity it's bringing to the writing experience and making me excited about it as well and get more invested in the characters. So I've been really fortunate with reader feedback. They've been just a goldmine of information and willingness to participate.
Excellent. DL?
So I could kind of want to build on what both Lex and KD have already said, and it is very important to first know a lot of people and understand, first of all, that not only do we have a lot of similarities, so whenever you're writing about someone who's not like you, you don't have to quite other them too much. You can still find something that you relate to with them, but then also understand that their experiences are still going to be different from yours, and you still need to be able to capture that in it. And if you're going to be writing someone who's from a completely different culture that you've never been to that country or you know anything about, then it is also important not just to research that culture as much as possible, which you should definitely do, and through as scholarly of like sources as possible, but also do still try to reach out and try to find someone who is from that culture and who's willing to answer questions for you, or even if you can just find sensitivity readers who are within that group who can read what you've written and be like, okay, yeah, but that's not exactly how it is. And if you just tweak something here or there, or here's the actual experience of being from that culture and what it's like for me, then that can really help you to sort of be respectful, because the main thing about depicting someone who's not like you is you have to be respectful, and you can't reduce it to a stereotype or a tokenization. You have to respect them as people because they are people and they're not that different from you, even though there are still differences. I hope that makes sense.
I'm a firm believer in the find a friend and ask questions. The look of terror in my husband and my friends' faces when I say, "You're a guy, I have questions," is a wonder to behold. But there is great value in, okay, I've got a guy, okay, I have a character in this situation. How would you react? Being able to ask that kind of question and get that kind of information. Of course, I'm doing it the other way around too, because I have been a paraplegic for 30 years, and writing a character with a disability. In my case, I pretty much don't wheelchair backwards, forwards, and sideways. I have to ask questions if I'm writing a blind character. Depending on the issue, you're gonna get at least 5 answers for every question, and take notes. Now, when we write a character not like ourselves, and I'm thinking particularly in the other cultures than ours, um, how do you approach it uh, without seeming to be, well, you know, they're expecting an unpleasant conversation sometimes. How do you approach it?
Well, I think that you need to make sure that the friend that you have would be comfortable with talking about these things to begin with. And don't just be like, like, hey, you're from India. I'm writing a character from India. Can you answer my questions? Don't just assume that they're gonna do it, and stuff. Just be more like, hey, I'm going to be writing a character from India. If you're comfortable with it, I've got some questions. Or if you don't, or if you're not, do you know anybody who would be willing to talk to me? And stuff like that. And so just never make assumptions with your friends just because they're, from that group and stuff. And again, just respectful. Just be respectful of other humans. So that's how I approach it.
I always
Good
think
approach.
about, I'm a huge fan of the Golden Girls, and I always think about this episode where Dorothy has been very, very sick for a very, very long time, and she finally goes to a doctor who is Asian. And while she's in there, Sophia is trying to, smooth the way and everything. Well, she keeps asking this poor man all of these ridiculous questions about being Chinese, like, if I go to a Chinese restaurant and I ask them to not put MSG in there, do they put it in anyway? I mean, just stupid stuff like that. I always think about that conversation. Don't be a Sophia. Don't ask questions, about things that are stereotypes. Don't just assume that somebody who is Asian knows how to make Chinese food. I mean, that's, they might be like me and can't make anything. They don't cook at all. So, you have to, like Dale was saying, you have to kind of respect them as people and know that, people have many different layers. They are not just their culture, and I find that a lot of people, like, I have my friend Nicole Kurtz, who I'm sure that many of you know. She talks a lot about people say things to her because she is a Black woman, not intending to be offensive, but just like they'll say the most ridiculous things to her. You know, and so you have to see people as a person and not a stereotype. And remember that they are also not a voice, a mouthpiece for their entire race. You know, they can only speak for themselves. And again, you also want to approach the question not as teach me about your culture. I mean, it's really not up to the Black community to teach us about the Black experience. I mean, we've been living with these folks for, you know, I mean, I would assume your entire life. So, you know, you should be smart enough to be able to figure this stuff out for yourself at this point. So I think that is definitely something that, and that comes from living in a bubble and not, you know, not ever getting to know people on a personal level. I know I feel like I'm rambling, so I'm gonna shut up.
Part of my background is in human resources, so that affects everything I do. In human resources, before you have a discussion, you set parameters. And when you're having a discussion like this with someone and looking to learn from them, part of the parameters I'm very clear about is I'm an idiot. I am an absolute 100% idiot. I'm going to say stupid things. I want you to know I am genuine about learning. And the starting point of this conversation is usually the person has come forward and offered themselves and their feedback. I wouldn't necessarily dive into a conversation with someone just making an assumption that they could provide me information. One of the things I found is that, I mean, I've come from an age where, you know, decades went by and I had little diversity experience, including even diversity experience, you know, as a gay man in my own self and my own background. Especially when it comes to including, for instance, non-binary people in my novel. I'm one of those people who I do struggle sometimes using they instead of he, she. It's been a learning experience for me. But one of the things I'm really clear about is that I am absolutely heartfelt and genuine about this. I've introduced non-binary characters who are just incredibly dear to me in the novel. To do that, I think I've forged enough of a relationship with the people giving me feedback, including my readers sometimes when I'm asking for feedback through social media, that they're really tolerant when I stumble, especially when they catch me and remind me. And they're good about doing that. They're good at telling me, you know, you slipped, you didn't say they in that circumstance. And they can always tell from my reactions that I'm mortified and horrified, and I double down on making myself better the next time around. But I think having that sort of a genuine interaction, when you genuinely want this information, you genuinely care about the person giving you feedback, you're genuinely respectful and trying not to say something that's going to offend them, all of that comes through to a really positive conversation. God knows it has for me. I've learned so much, and it's made me so excited about including these elements in my story.
There is a move farther in this direction of making sure you get it right, of making sure that your cast of characters is diverse and well-rounded and well-researched. This is not a bad thing. This is something I want to see more of as well. I have benefited uh, both personally and in my writing from a wide variety and wide, very diverse friendships. And it's been like that since I started college and finally got away from a county where there was not a single person of color in the county, bit rural and bit Kentucky. So uh, going to college was an education, not the way they meant. But I don't think if you approach it correctly, even if they say no, if you are respectful, they will. I think most people understand what you're doing and why. And it is helpful. Yes.
I just want to say, and also if you're approaching a fellow author, they'll be even more understanding. So if you make more author friends and stuff from different communities, because actually an author friend of mine reached out to me because I'm trans and he's writing a trans character and he wanted my feedback. And I was like, yeah, dude, I'll answer any questions you have, but also here are some other trans authors I know that write own voices stuff that are more from like because I don't write stuff about the trans experience. It just happens to be there's various types of LGBT representation, but they write things from the trans experience, which might be more helpful to you. So here, try these and stuff, but I will always be here for you if you have any questions and stuff. So I think fellow authors are probably a fantastic resource because we will understand where you're coming from and that you're going to be trying your best to be respectful and in your representation, because we try that too. So so I would definitely recommend them.
Networking
is
is
yeah,
your
that is
friend.
such
yeah.
that is such a good point. Recently I've started writing a thing about a person of color, Black male who is also a goth. And so I get on Facebook and I'm like, can I please, I know that I mean, I've been, you know, around the goth community and everything, but I've been around the goth community as a white person. Is there any, do I have any author friends who are in the goth community who are Black who could tell me if how your experience is different from the one that I've had? And have gotten a hugely positive response from that.
Very good. And I love that, Katie, I love that your readers are so responsive to that. It is helpful no end, I'm sure. And it just means you've got good readers. So, in terms of being a resource, I being in the wheelchair, I use a power chair, and probably as many conventions as I've done, I'm fairly visible. So people will come to me and ask, and I'm always delighted to help out in that way. As I said before, networking is your friend because I can go to them and go, okay, now about how you do this, and it helps. We've all seen bad representations. I'm not going to ask anybody to name names. The guilty will be kept anonymous. But if you can come up with a really bad representation and suggest how you could have made it better or how that writer could have made it better, that sometimes the negative examples are as helpful as the positive ones.
I'm happy to say one of the things that drives me nuts the most is when a male writer writes woman in his story and just does such a horrible job. I mean, part of the journey I've been on is the overwhelming population of my readers are female, or identify as female, and seeing the world through their eyes has opened mind to just how awful it can be when it's not done well in writing, when no thought is given to what that character might be as an independent individual with their own thoughts and desires and behaviors, and is simply a set piece or reaction for the main character. When it's done wrongly, especially when gender is involved, it's just so inauthentic. It almost cancels the entire novel. It really creates something impossible for me to get beyond. That's why I'm such a big believer it's worth drilling down on these issues and doing the research and making it seem more authentic, because it can derail your whole writing experience, and the reading experience of the person who reads it when it's done awfully. But from even when I was young, those are the examples that have always been the most glaring to me. Anyway, I'm curious what other people have to say.
Lex?
Okay, so usually the most glaring examples that are put forth on like social media are bad romance novels. So hearing, I love the ones where male romance writers are writing sex scenes with females. And they're so ridiculous, you know. A lot of times men, when they write women, you're like, have you ever met a woman in your entire life? Because they just, I mean, women react very emotionally in general. I don't want to make a generalization or anything, but women tend to be more emotional than men are. And you know, so men writing sex scenes with women is really kind of fun, just because they get different. I mean, they have a different experience of sex than women do. So, you know, I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying it's kind of funny. But probably my favorite misstep in representation is the 50 Shades of Grey misrepresentation of the BDSM community. It's so bad, you guys. I mean, and
I'd heard
dangerous in a
that.
lot of ways. Just because, you know, the things that it was very obvious that the author did not know any people in that community and had not participated in that community and didn't do a whole lot of research in that community. And a lot of people that are in that community were very offended by it, but they were also very disturbed that people were trying some of the, I guess, techniques in that book and were hurting themselves. So I think, you know, and
And
that's
each
another
other.
side of it. You have to be really careful with things like that because you don't want people to hurt themselves.
Good point. DL.
I actually, this was the pet peeve that I gave in the writing LGBT and horror, that I don't like it when people try to force a heteronormative concept onto queer relationships where it's like, this is the woman and this is the man of the relationship. And it's like, that's not accurate most of the time, really. I mean, so there's that. And then I'd also say that the strict binariness that people put trans characters into sometimes can be a little because I mean, all of our experiences are different, but I mean, I know trans men who have fully medically transitioned and stuff, but they love, you know, wearing skirts and painting their nails. And I know trans women who love working on cars. And so trying to make a character where it's completely like, if it's a trans woman, then she rejects all masculine type of things, or if it's a trans man, he rejects all girly kind of things. That's not really always accurate either. And again, I feel like just getting an actual trans person's perspective on that might help. So, because I mean, there are some of us who do, and sometimes we go through phases like that too, where we'll just completely reject everything of our assigned gender because we hate being associated with that. But it's not as solid as I feel like a lot of depictions tend to be of it.
Well, again, I mean, that kind of goes back to the whole thing of treating people like people instead of reducing them to their gender identity or reducing them to their sexuality or their, you know,
Right.
cultural.
Because basically it feels like you're turning us into stereotypes and stuff when you're
That's
doing
exactly
stuff
what
like
they're
that.
doing.
So yeah, there's
For
no
me,
nuance. So
my pet peeve is the fat girl loses weight and suddenly the world is her oyster.
Mm.
That is one of the reasons why I sold Misha Merlin on the idea of Such a Pretty Face, where the heroes and the heroines were people of size. They weren't the comic sidekick. They weren't the villain by virtue of the readings on the bathroom scales. Too many people buy into that one thing about, you know, lose weight and everything's fine. No. And I appreciate the people who write characters of size where that, those stereotypes are not in play.
And I hate it when fat girls, in particularly in romance novels, are always trying to lose weight. Some of us, we just like the way we are. You know what? We don't
Oh, yeah.
necessarily want to be a size 2. And I like that.
I'm probably still alive because what took the use of my legs didn't kill me, extra reserves. And if it had been 30 years ago prior, when I was on that whole thing, I figure I've lost about 1,000 pounds in my lifetime over, it's cumulative, gained about 1,100. So I know that losing weight doesn't suddenly make you a star. You're probably too sick to appreciate it if it does. So the people who know that, and the people who write it correctly and communicate it correctly, have my undying gratitude. But yeah, even I have pet peeves. So,
Lee, I think that's also a reminder that, because one of the things that I'm having my third novel beta read right now, and I've been accused of fat shaming because my main character is like me, and I want to lose weight, and I'm putting too much of that into my main character, and it's coming across as making unhealthy criticisms on weight, and making it seem like an issue of health when it's really not. The character's in great shape. There's nothing. He does not really need to lose weight, but we have to remember that sometimes when we get this feedback and criticism and it presses back on us, it's actually put me on a journey to realize that I'm projecting something horrible inside myself on the page. So not only am I fixing something I need to fix before it gets out of my hands, the light's shining on me. I am learning more about myself and my role in this world, and how I interact with my own body. So the representation can also be a great self journey as well for the writer.
excellent point. So someone has come to you and said, I'm writing whatever. Can you help me? What's the first piece of advice you give them? I'm waiting for lights to dawn. DL?
Oh, I mean, I think I already talked about a situation like that where a gentleman came to me because he was going to be writing about trans characters, so I helped him. But I mean, I do have people asking about, since I do use a lot of different folklore and mythology, and my degree is in world religions, so I do get people asking me about that. And so then I usually just kind of point them to things like JSTOR, or I'm like, go to your local universities or look up professors at different universities that are maybe in the field that you want to write in or use from, and see if they've got any recommendations of good articles or good books and stuff like that. Because part of representation also is representing people of different religions and stuff from you as well. So trying to be respectful of that is also very important, and understanding their religions can help with that. So that's what I would suggest.
That's good.
Okay.
We hadn't touched on religion, but that is as much a part of writing diversity as anything else we have talked about so far. So yes, excellent point. Katie?
I think usually I don't start the conversation. If they're asking me, if someone's coming to me and asking me for my input on representation, I'll turn around and say, well, what are you trying to represent? First of all, what's your story? Like, what are the elements that you really want to learn about? Because, like, say the conversation I recently had with a reader who's in a wheelchair, and she's in a powered wheelchair, and then she's in a wheelchair that she pushes along herself. And she asked me questions about what the scene was going to be about first, which I thought was great, because then it helped me brainstorm different elements of the world building. Like, there's this one point where she pulls out a folder, and we started having a dialogue. Well, when you're moving around in a powered wheelchair, like, I go around with a backpack and my folders in my backpack. where's your backpack? Is it on the chair? Do you have a separate compartment? And we all of a sudden we're having this great exchange, which is fleshing out, you know, these little quirks and various different small elements of the scene, which is going to make it more authentic, and just massively increasing my journey. But having, you know, explaining what your needs are before you have the person provide feedback, you know, sensitivity or diversity feedback, I think is a great way to do it.
Another good point. Lex.
Sorry, I was muted.
Sorry.
I think if it's possible to try and don't ask just one person, or don't just go to one source, you know, go and try and, you know, find as many people as you possibly can, read as much stuff as you possibly can. Anything you can do is going to make it more authentic. You know, if you're writing a character that's trans, don't just go to one trans person, because, you know, DL's experience as a trans person might be completely different than this other person's experience as a trans person. So I think you have to kind of spread it around a little bit if it's possible. Now, a lot of times, you know, you may not be able to find, you may have one friend or know of one person who is this particular, I don't know, maybe a fully transitioned trans woman, and you may not know of anybody else. So, I mean, there's always exceptions, but if you can, please try, because that's going to make your characters much more rich. That would be my advice.
One of the things I have done in the past is somebody comes to me and says, what's it like to be in a wheelchair? Let me demonstrate. I pull out my manual chair. I invite them to plop their butt into it. And then we go around the hotel or the space for a while, so they can experience firsthand what it's like opening doors, encountering steps, rolling across carpet instead of linoleum, whatever. Firsthand knowledge is a good thing when you can get it. It's not always possible, but actually, you know, if you're in a situation where you can experience something your character does, that's not a bad way to research either. So we're getting a note here. Okay. This is a question that came in from outside. Question from the audience, Vanessa. Thank you, dear. What are your thoughts on writing specifically main characters that are drastically different from you and your experiences? An atheist writes a deeply religious main character, a white person writing a person of color, a straight person writing a gay man character. So I think what's being asked is, do you object to that? Do you think it's a good idea? Just basically what you think about that much, you know, that much of diversion between the writer and the character.
I think it's a good idea. But again, as long as you're respectful, as long as you handle the character well, and basically everything we talked about with the whole make sure that there's actual depth and stuff to the character. But yeah, I think it should be fine to write a main character who's not exactly like you. But again, as long as it's just not tokenizing or basically just writing you, but with like a slap of like different colored paint on it, like if that makes sense. So
It scares the hell out of me. I'm in the middle of writing a book right now where the main character is a Black female. It scares the hell out of me. I'm so afraid that I'm not gonna get something right, or I'm going to, like DL was saying, put myself with a different face, you know. But I keep reminding myself that she's a person just like me. She's a woman just like me. So I try to remind myself of the things that we have that are the same, and you know, and then I try to I go to my friends and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. Am I way off here? Or, I think that whole research thing becomes more important when it's the main character. But yeah, it's scary, but I think it's something that we're all gonna, have to do, just because we want to make sure that we don't want to write the same story over and over again. So I've never been a fairy either. So I kind of have to, I think it's something that we're all going to have to face. So we have to get over that fear and get over that fear of talking to other people.
Yeah, this is a really tough question, and I'll be perfectly honest. I'm sure my thoughts on this are going to evolve, but where I'm at now, especially if a new writer came to me, someone who's maybe unpublished and trying to move in that direction, I'd say honestly consider not doing that for a main character, for a like central figure of a novel where the entire novel is about their experiences. That's a really difficult thing to do, and it is scary. And I'm not saying that I would be nervous as hell about doing that. I really, really would. Some people do it beautifully. And the idea that I might not, there's, the whole movement about own voices is very powerful right now. And there are some things about it I agree. And then there are some things that do kind of, stall my faith in it, because there's so many novels I wouldn't have read if it wasn't for someone who was brave enough to write about a topic that was maybe different from their experiences and opened up the way for other people to come in and write about it. And I get that. And in the hands of someone who really does a great, respectful job, it can be an amazing experience. But wow, it's filled with minefields too. To do a main character that has a life experience so difficult from yours, I don't know if I'm a strong enough writer to do that right now. Having secondary characters, absolutely, that's been part of my growth, to learn a little bit more, because it enriches the world. If you want the world to look like our world, if you want every one of your readers to find something in it that they can see their reflection in, then yes, you've got to do that. But a main character, everything we've been talking about on this call needs to come into play. Having great beta readers, having people you can rely on to get information, having it vetted by many different audiences ahead of time, because we've seen what happens when this isn't done well. I think we've all seen examples of that.
And I just want to add on to build onto what you're saying, because so you're talking about own voices. And so I do want to kind of make an addendum to what I was saying. I don't think you should do that with your main character if you're trying to write about that experience. Yeah, because I feel like that then strays into exploitative. And so don't try to do if you're not of whatever that character is, don't try to write a story about the experience of being that. So when I say totally go for it, but again, be respectful, I'm thinking more you're writing a genre kind of story, and it just happens to be that your main character is X, Y, or Z and stuff. And so you're writing about that story, and there's, of course, elements of X, Y, or Z that are going to affect it, but it's not about being X, Y, or Z, because that's not your story to tell. You don't get to tell that. So yeah, I'm against that. So I think it just depends on what thing you're trying to do. And
yeah, that's an important distinction to make. Absolutely. But you also don't want to have, you definitely don't want to, and again, I come at things a lot from the romance genre perspective. You also don't want to fall into the trap that the Hallmark Channel has finally figured out that they're falling into, and are trying to fix it. You don't want to always have the Black best friend. You don't want to have that, because you want to write books that have a lot of different people as the focal point. But I agree, you don't want to take somebody else's story and tell their story. You just, that's a completely different thing, and that is a very important distinction to make.
Very good. We've gotten a 10-minute warning, so I think we've got time for at least one more, possibly two. We've mentioned the term beta reader, but I don't think we've defined it. So if you would give me your definition of beta reader, and why they're good, how you utilize them, if you do. DL, you want to start?
Sure. For some strange reason, I always use beta reader when talking about fanfic, but I use test reader when talking about my actual book stories. I don't know why, but it's the same kind of thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's so basically I use my test readers / beta readers to tear apart my manuscript. I want them to pick apart every single thing about it and tell me where I did something wrong. And in this context, it can be, in how you represent somebody, but I also just want them to tell me if a scene sucks, and how it sucks or why it sucks so that I can make it not suck. So to me, that's what a beta reader is. And I think the reason I have it different for fanfic is because fanfic beta reader, I also use as editors where they catch like more mechanical things and other stuff too, whereas I have an editor for the books. So I think that's why I have a distinction in my brain, at least.
It actually makes sense. Lex?
Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with beta readers. I, of course, have Stephen King calls them first readers. So I've always thought of them as first readers, and those are people like if God forbid I make my husband read it, my best friend who also writes romance, I have her read it a lot. And I mean, it's important to have people that are not, friends of yours read it, but I don't know. I guess it kind of, the term beta reader kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth sometimes, because a lot of indie authors try to use beta readers as editors, and that is not the same thing. Beta reader is the person who reads your book and tells you, this is what I liked about it, this is what I didn't like about it, this is what I need more information on. Kind of helps to steer you during the writing process. And I feel like they're fine as long as you're not using them for an editor. I also, there's a trend that I don't know about other genres. There's a trend in romance right now where people are asking me paid beta readers, and I just think that's a little bit shady. I don't know. I may change my mind on that later. I don't know. But yeah, I would think a beta reader is just kind of the person a beta reader is kind of like the same experience that you would get from a writer's group, in my opinion.
Okay.
They're the people that read your book that kind of, I like this or I didn't like it.
Katie?
Yeah, Lex, that's a great answer. I think I support that one entirely. The only, I have my writing group who reads as individual chapters are read. I have another set of beta readers who've read the first half of novel 3, and then they'll read the second. And then I have another group who are just going to read it once it's done before I turn it into my editor. But I love the comment about paid beta readers, whether you say beta test or first readers. I think the only exception possibly to that is if you hire an experienced sensitivity reader. Those can be really worthwhile. Like I remember I had someone who was an official sensitivity reader, but she didn't charge me because she wanted to be an early reader. But she talked about things such as not using the phrase master code. And someone went to a door terminal and they had a master code to open it. And they're like, master just tends to bring up a lot of negative words in writing nowadays. And I'm thinking, absolutely, that's a piece of feedback I've never heard before. It makes perfect sense. There's no reason not to change it if it even causes, a few readers heartburn. It was such a small thing, but it was such an expert piece of advice that sometimes sensitivity readers can give you a lot as well. But again, you have to establish credentials and it has to be worth the money you pay.
Okay, we've hit the 5-minute warning, which is to say we're almost done. What I'd like to do is go around everyone, have them give a brief final thought, short, and also where you can be found for people who are interested in learning more about you and your work. Let's start with Katie.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to do this panel. Even through the course of it, I have a million thoughts bubbling through my head thinking, did I say this right? Did I not say this right? So anyone feel free to contact me with feedback because I'm always excited to increase my own learning around this issue. You can find me on Twitter at KD_Edwards_NC. That's the social media that I use pretty much exclusively. KD.Edwards or KD-Edwards.com is my website. And my third book is coming out next year, the Tarot Sequence, my series.
Lex?
Hi, I'm sorry, I was muted because I can't remember my social media information ever. Um, my my final thoughts are, as a reader, do not be afraid to look for books that have characters in them that are not like you. Because it will definitely enhance your human experience. And a lot of times we find ourselves falling into traps where we get in that little bubble where we only want to read things about people that are, like in my case, about white females. Don't do that. Don't do that. It makes your worldview very, very narrow. You can find me. I have a website. Totally just Google it, man. It's I think it's lexchristian.wixsite.com. I'm telling you, I'm terrible. I'm also on Facebook. I try to avoid Twitter as much as possible. Instead, I use Instagram. So you can see pictures of my dog. But anyway, and thank you for letting me be here. I really had a great time.
DL.
All right. So yes, definitely. Thank you for having me on this panel. So the last bit of advice that I would give is to get out there and read as much own voices stuff as you can find. And a lot of that is written by indie authors. And if you have trouble finding good indie authors, I'm also moderating the How to Find Indie Authors panel here at Multiverse Con. So check that one out. And you can find more information about me and how to contact me or stalk me on social media by going to thehollowsun.com. That is TheHollowsun.com. So yeah.
And my final word is don't be afraid to write diverse characters, people that aren't like you. Do your homework. You can find me at www.harphaven.net. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. And I would like to thank these lovely panelists for a wonderful discussion. Thanks to the audience for watching. And we now return you to your regularly scheduled con.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to Multivirtual 2020's Right Track. We hope you found the panel fun and you found it useful. Remember, for more about our panelists, please check the links below or head over to multiversecon.org, where you can find links to all of our guests. We've got so much great programming this weekend, so make sure to come out to our Discord server and hang out with us this weekend. We are at multiversecon.org/Discord. And if you go to that link, you can find all the information on how to join the Discord. And finally, would you like some Multiverse swag? When you go to the website, check out the store because we have shirts, we have masks, we have posters, enamel pins. We've also got this really cool map that I cannot wait to come in because I'm going to put it on the wall in my office. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on the next panel.